Ragnarok approaches, and let's face it, if your combat skills aren't up to snuff, the creatures and champions of the Nine Realms will tear you apart, even if you are the god of war. Fortunately, there are plenty of tips that we can offer to help you live up to the reputation of Kratos as a god-slaying ultra badass. These are 17, spoiler-free, essential early-game God of War Ragnarok tips you need to know. The heavy throw on your Leviathan axe is extremely strong. It will freeze weaker enemies in place, which by itself is wonderful because it takes one enemy out of the fight, but from there you can use a heavy barehanded attack to push them into a wall or off a ledge for an instant kill, or you can push them into other enemies to inflict frost on them and slow them down. Just know that it doesn't work very well on the burlier enemies that it doesn't instantly freeze. Don't sleep on the light throw of your axe either. Aiming for a weaker enemy's legs is a good way to trip them up and either stop their approach, or incapacitate them long enough for you to use a strong but slow move, like the Serpent Snare, which is a great move that not only does big damage, but also creates a small explosion of frost that affects other enemies. The Hyperion pull skill on the Blades of Chaos is one of the most universally useful skills in the game. In fights against standard enemies, it can pull them towards you and launch them up for an air combo, more on those right after this. It can pull weak wretches and nightmares towards you for instant kill opportunities, and if you upgrade the Hyperion grapple, you can hold down R1 and pull yourself towards them to knock them back and deal a bunch of stun damage. When you're using the Blades of Chaos, always look for air combo opportunities. Weaker enemies can be launched up by holding down R2, and once they're in the air, you can keep them there by holding down L2 and pressing R1 to slam them into the ground and bounce them right back up, just like in the old games. You can keep this up for as long as you want, though you'll need to be careful that others around you don't interrupt. Don't neglect your fists. They are essentially a third weapon and are especially good at building up stun damage. If you find yourself up against an enemy that you're not doing a lot of damage to, consider throwing your axe away and using your unarmed attacks in tandem with the Trace's arrows to build up that stun and go for an execution. Speaking of stun damage, once you fill the stun meter on an enemy, a R3 button prompt will appear next to them, letting you know that you can perform an execution. If this icon is yellow, then when you click R3 on them, you'll do a bunch of damage, but it won't kill them. If it's red, you'll get a proper execution. Fortunately, you don't have to click R3 immediately. Keep an eye on this meter to let you know if you still have time to deal damage before you press R3. If the icon is yellow, try doing some more damage to get it to turn red and secure the kill. God of War's combat system utilizes a popular action game technique called dodge offsetting, which means that if you're in the middle of a combo string, you can dodge and still pick up the combo where you left off after you come out of it. This is important to know because certain combo strings have greater power or unique properties on their final hits. It only works though if you do a sidestep, not the double tap roll evasion, so keep that in mind. Always think about positioning. Consider all of the following things. Can I see most of the enemies in the room? If not, take some time to reposition yourself so you don't get clipped from behind. Are there any opportunities for easy kills? Cliffs, walls that you can shatter frozen enemies against, or interactable objects in the environment. Always make sure you scout out and put yourself near these opportunities. Are there ranged enemies? If so, you'll want to either make sure you take them out quickly, or you put yourself in a spot where they can't hit you. Keep a close eye on your resources. God of War's combat largely revolves around your ability to manage a ton of different combat resources effectively. If you're struggling in a tough fight, make sure you're using everything at your disposal. These resources are your rage meter, your companion's arrows and special ability, your light and heavy runic attacks on the axe, your light and heavy runic attacks on the blades, and your permafrost and immolation meters, which you can also activate when full with certain skills. Also, make sure you know what each of the status effects do and how to inflict them. Inflicting status effects on certain enemies at the right time can really help turn the tide of a fight. Some early game ones to look out for are Sonic, most useful against airborne enemies to keep them suspended in stasis while in the air. If you see an enemy is almost full on Sonic buildup, launch them up and hit them with the Trace's Sonic arrows. And Frost and Burn. These are the most common status effects you'll have access to thanks to your axe and blades. Pretty self-explanatory. Frost will slow enemies down and freeze them when maxed out, and Burn will deal continuous damage. The game eventually teaches you that you can tap the L1 button twice to interrupt these blue circle attacks, but you can use the technique even before that to knock away enemy shields. It's a vital attack against shielded enemies even before they give you the warning sign of the blue circles. New to God of War Ragnarok is the ability to power up your axe by holding triangle, or start spinning your blades by tapping the button quickly. These are great techniques that you should get in the habit of using for a number of reasons. Quite simply, they deal more damage than regular attacks. They are also a great way of adding elemental status effect buildup, especially on enemies that are too tough to be frozen by your heavy axe throw. And finally, they typically do great area of effect damage, so they're especially helpful in fights where you're overwhelmed by a bunch of enemies all grouped up together. Two skills that will dramatically increase your damage output are Extinguish Flames on the axe and Vaporize Frost on the blades. These cause your weapons to deal more damage to frozen or burning enemies when attacking them with the opposing weapon. So, once an enemy gets frozen, you switch to your blades. And when they're on fire, you switch to your axe. This is tricky to get down, but it's something you should always think about as the damage increase adds up very quickly with each hit. Along those lines, two other skills you'll definitely want to upgrade as soon as you can are Permafrost and Immolation, both of which add elemental damage automatically to your axe or blades if you're able to keep your aggression up without taking damage. We touched upon it earlier, but note that there are two different types of dodges in God of War. A single tap of the X button makes you sidestep, while double tapping the X button will make you roll. In situations where you can't block an attack, generally you'll want to strive to sidestep, as you recover much faster from a sidestep and will still be within striking distance of an enemy after avoiding them. The roll is great to get out of a bad situation or to avoid certain attacks with a large area of effect because you're invulnerable for the entirety of the roll, but if your goal is to keep up the pressure, aim to use sidesteps instead of rolls. As you utilize many of the skills you unlock, you'll earn awards for using them a certain number of times. What Ragnarok doesn't tell you off the bat is that eventually you'll be able to empower skills you've got a gold medal for, further boosting their capabilities. You can choose from options like increasing the elemental damage, stun, or stagger resistance, so be sure to vary your skill use to level each of them up. Switching between your weapons in the heat of battle can be crucial to victory, especially when trying to make use of your runic attacks as they become available. However, finding the right time to swap weapons can be hard to manage. Luckily, you can essentially queue up a weapon swap by tapping the D-pad during other, lengthy and protected animations, like shield parries and skills. As soon as the animation is complete, Kratos will instantly bring out the other weapon. And that's all we've got for you for now. There are even more elements of combat to go over, but for now, in the interest of staying as spoiler-free as possible, we're going to leave it at that. Thanks for watching, and for more God of War Ragnarok, make sure to check out our review, along with all of our other guide-related videos. And for everything else, keep it here on IGN.